Welcome to Karate Cafe, your source for martial arts conversations since 2005. And now, here's your hosts, Paul Wilson and Dan Williams.
Hello again, everybody. It's Paul here with another episode of Karate Cafe. Off my center line and directly in front of me on the monitor, as always, is my good friend Dan Williams. Dan, how are you?
I am doing excellent. How are you, Paul?
I'm just ducky. You know why?
Why?
Because we have an interview today.
Ooh.
That's right.
Who are we interviewing today?
We are...
I don't know.
Well, he was just down in the green room with us. My new close personal friend and yours, Noah Legel of the Karate Obsession and Waza Wednesdays.
Right. Rhymes with bagel.
Rhymes with bagel. Which we had down in the green room, so that worked out nicely. And he ate them all. That's mine. Anyway.
You know, you need the carb load when you work out as much as he does.
Yeah, very exciting to have him on. I just asked him on a lark, and he had time today because we're just all sitting around at the house anyway.
Yeah, no kidding.
I even did one of his drills in my class last night and had a really good time with it. So he agreed to come on the show, and we are gonna have him on the show.
Excellent.
He's got a seminar coming up. You know, when the madness ends. We're going to ask him questions about his history, as always, and also about, just the whole practical karate boom.
Stuff, yeah.
And stuff, and basically just kind of geek out over martial arts.
Well, this is going to be fun.
Well, cool. Let's go talk to Noah. Okay, everybody, we are here with Noah Legel. Finally, I get a chance to virtually meet you. I was in Arizona, and it's like as we were staying in the green room before the show. I've been to Arizona a couple times, and I just did not put it together how close I was to you. And this one I was watching Waza Wednesday a ton, and jamming and all that good work on there. Anyway, but thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely, thanks for having me on.
We could probably talk for 14 hours. I mean, you are. Many people that listen to this show probably follow Karate Obsession, which is your very cool blog on that, and also Waza Wednesday. But I guess we probably should just jump in by saying that sort of basic, how did you start in karate?
Sure. I started late, so I didn't get into it until I was already 18 years old. I had always been a nerd, and unlike most people who get into the martial arts for martial arts movies or TV shows and Ninja Turtles and things like that, I got into it because of anime, because I'm that kind of nerd. And I had actually wanted to do swordsmanship of some description, but the nearest kendo school was an hour away and really expensive. So I found out that the local karate school had a sword class on Friday, but you had to be a karate student to attend. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll try karate out and see how things go and get into sword. And so I started training in Shuri-Ryu karate in central Illinois at the Academy of Okinawan Karate there in Morton originally, and joined in with their judo and their kobudo and the iai-jitsu that they had, and just kind of did everything. I was in the dojo probably... I was in 14 hours of classes a week. I don't know how many extra hours I was in the dojo, but I was in classes 14 hours a week.
Would you say you had a karate obsession?
I would say that I did.
And welcome to the show.
There you go.
Roll credits.
Buzzing.
And so, I did that for 2 years, very quickly climbed into instructing as just an assistant, helping out a white belt figure out something here and there, and moving on up to eventually helping with an entire class. Worked my way up to third Q brown belt in that system. And then about 2 years in, I moved to Arizona for work. And when I did that, didn't have any karate schools that I could really attend based on my work schedule and where I lived. The schedule was prone to change at some point, so I knew I'd have the option eventually. But for the first 2 years that I lived in Arizona, I trained in a judo school, Heart Judo, down in Mesa, Arizona. But there was no karate school that I could attend regularly, so I just trained by myself, did a bunch of research. That's the time frame where I found people like Ian Abernethy, Mario McKenna, Joe Swift's work on the internet, a variety of different people who put out material online. And that kind of got me more interested in the practical side of karate and looking at things from that particular perspective. So once my schedule did change, I started looking for a school that would fit that, and found my instructor, Richard Pogue, who at the time worked for his parents, but very shortly thereafter started his own dojo. And I trained with him until he passed away in 2017, and I've continued to train mostly kind of on my own Ronin style a little bit. Since then, I helped out at that dojo that he started, kind of keeping things going there for another 2 years or so, and then kind of left them on their path and went on mine.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to touch on, because that's where Karate Obsession I knew about, but I didn't peruse as much. But when you guys started doing the Waza Wednesday work, that's when I kind of started really cluing in on you and what's going on. And you and Sensei Pogue were doing some pretty interesting stuff. And I don't know if you remember, but you and I were talking about maybe doing a seminar or joining your seminars that you had. And that was right before you guys went to San Diego and
Yeah.
lost him. And that's pretty sad because I really wanted to meet him and you. And again, kicking myself because I missed a really interesting opportunity. And so I guess probably that's a bit of news that I didn't know that you kind of branched. So that was one of the things I wanted to get into, because I don't know if you heard our interview a few years ago with the Karate Culture guys, but we've heard it lots of times where, someone's like Sensei retires or passes away or moves away, and then people have to
what do you do?
Yeah, they either give up on their training or they thrive and they grow. So, I mean, I guess probably how did his passing, throw you? And then how did you recover from that?
Yeah. Well, when he started Peaceful Warrior Martial Arts with his partner, Tiffany, they, started in this little church renting space. And I had taken one or maybe two classes with him before he started that, and then moved to follow him. And so I got to kind of see the whole thing grow and evolve. And I helped out wherever I could, mostly on online aspects of things. But I was a ready demonstration dummy too, so that helped out. But, he had a very particular teaching style, and he had just kind of a remarkable understanding of how things worked from a martial perspective in general. And he had a practical focus. He kind of walked the line of still following the way that the system was put together by the organization and how we're supposed to do things. And these are the pieces of curriculum that are required, and still trying to get every practical piece he could out of that, because the practical side was kind of his focus. And he still, loved competition and all these other things. So he's a very well-rounded person from that perspective. He looked at every aspect of it and tried to get something from it. And that's not something that you find very often. And the fact that, I was in it for the practical side of things, and he had that, was awesome. And we got along really well, and his teaching style worked really well for me. So that kind of shaped my evolution, beyond just the people who've sort of helped me build the foundation when I was in Illinois. Everything after that, was all him. So I developed over time this very particular sense of how karate should be. And he and I talked a lot about the things that, we would change if we could, or remove if we could. And, he had also said that when he joined the organization, he wasn't part of the organization that we were in because of the organization. He was in it because of the fact that's where the person he wanted to learn from was. And that he was loyal to that person.
The person, not the organization.
But it wasn't about the organization.
Right.
So, if his sensei went somewhere else, he'd go there too. It didn't matter to him what organization it was. And, when he passed away, I wanted to keep his legacy going, and I was helping out with the dojo. And I was actually, although a lot of people kind of think I was the front man next
guy.
And I was from a certain perspective, but I was not the highest ranking person there by any means. When he passed away, we had, 2 6th dans and a 5th dan that were still, teaching actively at the dojo. And I lowly knee dan. So, rank structure wise, there were people more senior than me and more experienced than me. So a lot of people kind of made the assumption that I was taking over the dojo, which I never did. I helped out teaching classes, but so did everybody else. But tried to keep everything going, and they are still going, actually. But after a while, without him being there, it's one of those things where nobody teaches quite like him. Mm-hmm. Nobody teaches the kinds of things that he does. All the other instructors have their own backgrounds and different experiences and preferences and things like that. And none of it was quite what I was used to learning from him, or what I wanted to learn and work on, and or trained in the way that he did. And it was something that I wanted to continue those things as much as I could. But I also felt like I didn't want to deal with all of the politics that were coming up with the organization and things like that.
What? This is the first I've heard of this in martial arts.
Right. Yeah.
Martial arts. But it's one thing when you've got an instructor who kind of shields all of his students from that, and then for him to go away, and then you have to see all this as you're trying to
and you have to put up with the BS.
Yeah, and you get to see more than you were meant to see, so to speak. Yeah. And
the man behind the curtain, as they say.
Yeah, a little bit. And then it's also just a matter of, all those conversations we had of things we would change or things we would remove. I was, again, loyal to him and not the organization. I didn't join the organization I was a part of, because of the organization. It was just because that's where the instructor was that I wanted to learn from. And without him being there wasn't anything to keep me there unless there was another instructor that I wanted to be directly under. And he's a hard person to replace. You're not going to replace him ever. And then to try and find somebody that you want to follow after that is a little difficult. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and so that's that's the thing. Hence the question is because like so many people just like throw up their hands and go like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And they just quit. They quit training, completely. Yeah. And but I think it shows the true character of whoever it is, the martial art that we've talked about on the show before about being fed and feeding yourself.
Right.
Yeah, as a martial artist, there's a certain tipping point where you should stop being expecting to be fed and you should start trying to feed yourself. And it sounds you probably crossed that line quite a while ago, but then it was now put to the test. And the guys at Karate Culture was kind of put to the test. Guys like my close personal friend Ian Abernathy. He kind of made the decision, and it seemed like it was kind of a natural sort of progression away. It wasn't so jarring as having to be thrown through the crucible of like I lost my instructor in my school. You at least had a dojo still going and stuff. So how did you negotiate that sort of moving away? Yeah. And then also I guess probably what's for the future for you?
So for the most part, I just sat down and had a conversation with them about. At the time, I was actually supposed to move to another city here in Arizona. That ended up falling through, so that threw a whole bunch of just chaos at me. But it was something where I was already going to be moving, and I had kind of this idea that I'd start my own program, and that was sort of a good time to do it if you're going to move anyway. Mm-hmm. And so I started that process and got things moving, and I set a schedule out of, okay, I'll I'll keep helping out with classes until this time. After that, I really got to focus on getting everything moved and whatnot. I left it open to where if they needed me to help out here and there for something, I could schedule some time to make the trip over or what have you. But at least on a regular basis, I was not going to be there anymore. And as far as what things look like going forward, things got messed up between the move falling through and then the COVID-19 thing going on. So not starting the program just yet. I got everything all ready to go for it, like logo and Facebook pages and business licenses and all that.
Wow.
And, got that all ready to go before everything fell through.
Well, thank goodness it was before and not like a week after, right?
Right. Yeah.
We have
oh, great. I had one class. And
right. And now I've got rent due.
One of our instructors in our federation, he just in San Antonio rented his space, started getting built out, the whole shooting match, and so he last week was like the inspectors are here to check the electricity and blah blah blah, and then I'll be open.
Yeah.
So that's a hard. So I guess that's probably a good segue onto all your social media stuff. I mean, Wazawindu is great. We'd like to get into how you started doing Karate Obsession, but then further how in this time you're still putting out some videos and stuff on YouTube. How is that affecting your training, and are you getting any more requests for material?
It's something I was specifically going to ask as well. It sounds to me like throughout your history you have done some self-motivated kind of home training, and I wonder if during those times it seems like that time is now for everybody. So I guess is there anything that you can share to say, okay, this is the routine that I used, or these are the resources that I used, or something like that?
So for me, because I did this for 2 years. I still got to do judo during that time, but as far as karate went, I was having to self-motivate on that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was helpful for me during that, and even still, is the fact that it's a continuous learning process.
Yep.
It's not a workout necessarily. It can be, but I find that if I'm training just to work out, I am way less motivated.
Right.
than if I am training to learn or figure something out.
Mm-hmm.
So doing research, and whether that's historical and cultural research, or whether that's looking at videos of what other people are doing, but trying to figure out new aspects of the art, then gives me inspiration to try and do different things and figure out how different things might be done, how they might be applied, and that sort of thing. And because you can keep adapting and changing each component that you're working on, it's never going to be the same every time, unless you purposely try to make it that way.
Right.
But the same thing every time gets boring. So, the key to being able to repeat things is, and keep up with things, is doing it by stealth, as Ian Abernethy likes to say, since we're throwing repetition by stealth. So it's just sort of tricking yourself into this, habit of practice that is really just the same stuff, but done differently each time.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you can be excited about learning it, that makes it much easier to do. And it's not just a workout then of, okay, I've got to rep out 500 punches now.
Right.
There's a time and place for that, but most people aren't motivated by that.
Right.
No.
So
that's what I found with our classes, in the Matrix, is the first week or two, people were kind of willing to let go and just do Kihan and do their kata a couple times, and then I could sense a little okay, what are we gonna do?
Right. What's next?
We're gonna do Kihan, or Kabuto or whatever, and then trying to work some sort of frame of reference. And it was, so for me, I think we were talking about this in the green room. about like I was just like pinging like, okay, what's a core part of our system?
Mm-hmm.
And for us, it's Tai Sabak, getting off the center line and whatnot. So like for the black belts, I was like just pinging on that. Like, everything we do, we're going to do not linear,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to do it with body change, and we're going to do it focusing on your feet. And, we're going to, focus on using your knuckles where you need, really visualizing your target. And then like for the Q ranks, it was, not just dropping in and getting your velocity, and your momentum going, is like, kind of check your momentum and keep it tight, keep it in close, sort of in a practical sense of like you're being attacked. And so you're not going to have all this room because you've got your living room, or, whatever. So I had one guy in a class the other day, he actually was in his room, his roommates were in the other room, and he had to open the closet door so he could like do his kicks and whatnot. And I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. Like you need
Right.
to adjust to do that, and that's a key component. So, but it's the same stuff.
Yeah.
You just got to do it differently because, and as I've touched upon, and no, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this, is for me is everything I've heard about, old Okinawa was like, you had this much room in your dojo, or you were outside. It's like you didn't have all these big high, dojos and nice wood floors and blah, blah, blah. So, and you didn't have you had two kata, and that's what you did, and you just tore that up.
In a glorified living room.
Yeah, right. Yeah, very often. So, I mean, it's, again, the cycle of karate going on. So have you been having like requests for material from the inner worlds?
I have. I have done a couple web sessions. We did one on Pasai from the Shorin-ryu system that I do, which is Tawada Pasai. Some people call it Matsumura Pasai, but that's another story. And I did a session on creating a kata, which was a lot of fun. And I've had a couple people kind of jump in there asking about seminars. So I've got some that are kind of in the works, and one that's already scheduled now for the first weekend of August up in Flint, Michigan at Heian Karate Do, run by Paul Mussolf Sensei. The plan is to run through Nahanchi applications, probably Pinan Heian applications as well, and a variety of skill building drills, things like that. So I'm excited for that because I haven't gotten to teach a group in a while with
that's gonna be weird.
everything going on. I've done little, private sessions here and there, but nothing group based. And I did host a seminar recently with Ulf Carlson Shihan going over Kishimoto-ri. That was just before the quarantine stuff.
So did you say creating your own kata?
Yes, I did.
So tell me about that. What I mean, are there guidelines, or is it just move around the floor and do different techniques?
There are definitely guidelines. So, and kind of like anything, I think this is all much easier for somebody who's used to teaching people, and just like being self-motivated to train, I think is much easier when you teach people, because essentially you are your student at that point.
Right.
So students who have no teaching experience, it's harder for them to figure out what to do. And so you kind of need some guidance. So for most people to try and make a kata, they sort of put together movements, however, and cool, it's in a pattern and I ended in the same spot, it's a kata. But
yeah, I find that kind of interesting because like whenever I visited non-traditional or eclectic schools, and you can see there's a kata that they're doing, and you can just look at it and go like, they made that up.
Right.
Because it just something just does not look as polished and or organic as old school kata.
Yeah. And I think that's probably because they're not following any of the guidelines that you really should follow. And you can basically take a look at the guidelines that are already in place for doing bunkai, for breaking down a kata and figuring out applications for it and alternative applications, things like that. Well, if you're going to follow those after the fact, you might as well be following those in advance.
Yeah. Right.
So, if you look at, Kaisai no Genri that was outlined by Toguchi, for example, that's got things about the angle of the kata indicating the direction you're going. Mabuni said that as well. It's got, pieces about if you're touching your body, that's where you're touching the opponent. It's got things about, advancing and retreating, and a variety of different things. So you've got some classical examples from people like Toguchi, Mabuni, Motobu, even Funakoshi, and that have written out these things that kind of indicate to you what the applications of the kata might be, or how to figure them out. So you should follow those when you're making your own kata. And You're not making the kata based on the movements, the solo movements. You should be making the kata as if they were all these different drills that you wanted people to learn, and then you're putting them together in an order that kind of makes sense so that they feed one into the next, or at least build skills to go to the next one. So with all that in place, you go, okay, well, I'm not even starting my kata with just me. I have a partner for this. So you go, okay, what do I want my kata to do? You've got different options for how you can approach the kata. You can approach them as just a collection of techniques that don't necessarily need to be connected together at all. Mm-hmm. You can approach them as every technique can lead into the next one as some sort of a failure cascade. So if it doesn't work, move on to this. If this doesn't work, move on to this.
Interesting.
You can have it be a theme. So, okay, these are all individual drills. They're not all necessarily connected, but they all follow the same theme. Either they're dealing with the same type of attack, or they are dealing with the same type of response to the attack, or they're using similar techniques to, counter, control, or defeat the opponent in some way. So you can approach how you're doing it differently, but you decide on how you're doing it, and then you go, okay, partner, I want you to attack me like this, and let's figure out what we can do with that.
Right.
Realistically, what works. And then after you figured out something that you like that works, you go, okay, what's that look like without a person? Mm-hmm. There's your first move of your kata.
Yeah, that's nice. One of the things I really like about that idea is I think that martial arts are so much more than kick, punch, block. And I think especially with the new movements of MMA and reality-based self-defense and all that jazz, they get so focused on kick, punch, block that they don't understand. I'm using very general terms that going to a traditional martial arts class is more than just the techniques. And the idea of being able to put together your own kata and doing a theme-based approach, or, focusing on this thing or that thing, more than anything else, I mean, the expectation would not be that someone's going to walk away and their kata is going to live for 100 years. This was the fun and engaging mental exercise to look at some aspects of the stuff that I'm doing that I may not have discovered before. We used to have a extracurricular class that was fight choreography, and it was just fun, but sometimes you'd also open something up and you'd discover, hey, this is something that I've never thought about before, and now that I'm trying to do it in a different way, I'm able to see aspects of my martial arts that I hadn't before. Absolutely. So I love the idea of being creative. I have talked in the past about doing your kata with different mental mindsets. So doing one really hard where you have a low center of gravity, and doing the exact same kata but do it soft, or do it really slow, or do it really fast. And you start to pull things out of those discoveries and say, oh, that's interesting. If I do this one fast, then I kind of get off balance for my next technique. Okay. And then you can kind of roll it from there. Yeah. So
go ahead, finish that.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, because that's I kind of want to get Noah's take on that whole, like, sort of the practical karate, explosion, the boom. Speaking from because Noah's background is an Okinawan system, And here's one of the things. This is what I've been seeing over the last few years is there's been a lot of people that are going like, oh my gosh, there's practical karate, and oh my gosh, it's not meant to be 3 feet away and do this, and like,
Right.
oh my God, Hikate,
That's
Hikate does something, and there are all these guys, and I my system, for lack of a better term, is like an older system, right? It's like it's not. Matsumura Saito kind of went over that way a little bit while everybody else went this way, but what I'm seeing stuff is like when I go to like mostly Okinawan schools, and then I'll go and I'll train with Shotokan guys or Taekwondo guys, and then I hear all these people talking about this. I'm like, this is not new. You're not discovering anything. You may be rediscovering or uncovering, but you just didn't, just because it wasn't presented to you. It's not like you're reinventing the wheel. And so like there's been an explosion, and people are putting a whole lot of work, which is great. But is the space getting cluttered? Is it getting full? I mean, how do you see that, like, it blowing up? It's not like everyone has a YouTube channel now, and everyone.
Right. That's a good question.
So, and you're an early adopter, so you should, say that.
I can understand a concern for some sort of, market saturation, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because you're going to start seeing, and you can already, find it as you start looking through these, you're going to see a lot of things that are very similar. As long as nobody starts doing the, hey, no, I came up with that before you did kind of thing, because like you said, it's not really that they're, figuring out brand new things so much as they are rediscovering pieces that were there originally and they lost track of. So nobody's creating stuff, really. They're just figuring things out. And I'm not really worried about too many people getting involved in that sort of thing. I will say that there is also a difference between practicing, older karate or Okinawan karate, and having it be practical at the same time. Because you can learn an Okinawan system that is a perfectly traditional Okinawan system, and it doesn't focus on sport, kumite and kata demonstrations, and have it still not be practical, because the practical part of it isn't just the material. Practical part of it is how you train the material. Yeah. So you might be learning great material, but if you're never working it in a way that develops practical skill, it's only developing technical skill and understanding, then you're learning something that you can pass on, sure, but you're not learning something you can really apply, which is the practical part of it. So it's, to me, a thing where a lot of the people who are going into the practical karate movement are, people from more modern systems, so to speak. Like you mentioned, Shotokan, Taekwondo, Kyokushin, the newer systems that were mostly set up very much kind of sport-oriented, which is fine for what they're doing. But a lot of those people, especially as they get older, decide that the sport thing isn't so much what they're interested in. They want to get back to the roots of things. And that's where they start to find the practical karate and the Okinawan karate material. But it is not just a matter of, hey, I went to this Okinawan school and they've got all those joint locks too. Yeah, but if they still do those joint locks just from a, lunge punch where the guy stands still afterward and pulls his hand back to his hip and doesn't do anything with it, and they never try it against resistance, it might be the right material, but they're not practicing it in a practical way. And I think that generally that growing practical mindset can be helpful for Okinawan systems too, to reevaluate what they're doing and go, okay, it's not that the material we have is bad, but we've been approaching this in a very sterile way. Right. And it gives you a good technical understanding of how this technique is supposed to work, but it doesn't give you a practical understanding of how that technique is supposed to work. If that
so what are your thoughts about people that basically just burn the house down behind them? They go, because my joke was, and Dan and I mentioned it on the show before, is like, you scratch a Krav Maga instructor, you're going to find a 6th degree in Taekwondo that got punched. And some didn't work.
Yeah.
And now the Taekwondo guys are
yeah.
I can hear the keyboards.
You find the Aikido guy, like
there you go,
who just decided he couldn't make Aikido work and decided to leave and do MMA.
And I know their heads are shaved and they got their Spyderco knife and their tactical stuff and they're taking Krav Maga and RBSD. And I mean, do you? I think that's unhealthy for me as like, because everything that you just did, for good or ill, that's the foundation that you're on, and all the concepts are pretty much there in all the martial arts. Now, whether or not they got practiced, whether or not they got pressure tested, whether or not they were effective in the beginning, that's all hearsay. That's a period of your life that you have behind you that you probably should continue to leverage. I mean, do you think that's a healthy mindset, or do you think?
I don't want to necessarily say that it's bad, because I understand the appeal, so to speak. I can understand finally rejecting the sunk cost fallacy of I've put so much time into this, so I have to keep doing it. I can understand the desire to go, no, I reject that. This doesn't work for me, and I'm going to go a different route. And that's not necessarily bad, but I think that it's healthy for people who do that to kind of reevaluate why they made that
decision. There you go. Yeah.
At a later point, at the very least. Yeah. When it comes down to it, all the martial arts that exist were originally derived in some capacity from real fighting, real self-defense, something to that effect. And then it was changed and evolved over time for different purposes. What that purpose was is going to define a lot of its practice, practices and training methods and things like that. So, if you look at something like Aikido, because I used that reference with Ropus, who's very popular, it's something where it was developed, yes, as a martial art, but kind of with a really, really heavy emphasis on the art and the focus on not just personal development, but technical study of this particular concept. So it's a very, very isolated and encapsulated study of things. So if you go, oh, no, that whole thing doesn't work, I can't make it work, and abandon it, what I think you'll find later on is that when you start looking at some of the things that were in it from a conceptual perspective and not a technical perspective, which I understand in a situation like that is hard to do because you've been on that technical learning. When you start looking at it conceptually and you start doing something else for a while, at some point you're going to realize, oh, I'm still doing that. It just doesn't look anything like the technical version that I did. He posted a thing about how Irimi Nage doesn't work and you can't make it work. And, here's a video of me with a BJJ instructor trying to make it work. Meanwhile, I do something that's the same concept pretty frequently in resistant training, in stand-up grappling and kakedameshi type training. But it doesn't look anything like it, from a technical perspective. I'm not doing a parry pass into this arm bar thing where they stand up and then I flow underneath the chin and do this very flowy thing the way that they do it. I'm not doing it at all the way they do it. But the overall concept of what I'm doing, I'm getting an arm under their chin, tipping their head back, pushing their back out of the way so that they fall. Conceptually, it's the same idea. Yeah. It's just applied very differently. And then, of course, I trained it with progressive resistance to get to where I could do that. And so I think that when people leave things, if they eventually if they keep training, if they don't just leave things and say, I'm done completely, if they go and train in something else, I think that eventually they can circle back and look at things from a more open-minded conceptual perspective and go, no, I still do a bunch of that stuff. Yep. And I think in hindsight, you could then go, well, I could have fixed that then.
Well, and I've seen that, especially people like we'll take Aikido as the example, is that even when they move on to other martial arts, their flow and body mechanics are really pretty amazing, actually, because that's what they have been hounding over and over again is the body mechanics and the flow. One of the things that I wanted to mention is I have a kind of a bugaboo about the term practical karate.
Do
because well, it implies that all other karate is not practical.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, I think, and I've kind of,
hang on, let me dial and get my close personal friend Ian Abernathy on this.
yeah, he and I can have a chat about that later. No, but I think that what a lot of people miss nowadays is the fact that here's a good example. The what was it, Kobudo?
Mm-hmm.
That
Weapons.
how often do you have a sword, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you
Don't
could,
make me.
right?
I already had to take Ian down on this, and I'll take you two down, Wing Chun boy.
Do it. It implies that taking that martial art is useless if you never have a sword with you, and it really makes me crazy that, especially even in the situation that we just talked about, you know, I personally know someone. They took Taekwondo for a long time. They were they realized that a lot of the things that they were being taught weren't quote unquote practical. And so they got very disappointed and almost depressed that the 5-6 years that they had done this art felt meaningless and that they hadn't gained anything from it. And I am definitely of the attitude or opinion that there are many, many more things that are valuable about the martial arts rather than kick, punch, block. So I think that as we've gotten more quote unquote practical, especially because of MMA and things like that, that unfortunately, people aren't just willing to say, look, that's part of what we do here, but that's not the focus of what we do here. So when you walk into an Aikido class for the first time and, you know, you have the instructor going, oh, you'll be able to take down 3 people, 4 people, no problem. You'll master everything and you'll be amazing fighter. Instead, they could say, look, that's not really what we focus on. We focus on discipline and spirituality and, you know, all of these other things, community, stuff like that. Is that one aspect of our martial arts that you can explore? Sure, of course. Is it our main point? No, not really.
And I of course think that all of those things are good aspects of it, and that, you know, anybody can train a martial art for any variety of reasons, and it doesn't have to be because they want practical self-defense skills.
Right.
You know, that I didn't get into it for that. You know, I got into it. I was a nerd who wanted to swing a Japanese sword around. You know, so you can get into it for all sorts of reasons, and I think that the key is that instructors need to be honest with the focus and intent of the training, because you will have people say, oh, you know, well, this will teach you self-defense. Meanwhile, they don't have anybody ever attack you with a realistic attack. They don't have realistic responses to those attacks.
No pressure testing.
Right. And so it's perfectly fine to teach a martial art that isn't focused on the practical side of it.
Yes.
Not a problem, but you should be honest about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not even that they don't have anything that can't cross over.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can say, hey, you know, these are things that if you wanted, you could explore for self-defense purposes, but you would need to do them differently, or you would need to do some additional training, things like that. I don't see a problem with it if you're honest about it.
Yeah.
So really, I think that the whole practical karate movement as a term is more to put a specific label on that is the primary intent of this particular practice. It's not that it doesn't have the other pieces, but the primary focus is we're teaching you practical things you can use.
Yeah.
If you want to learn it for other reasons, it's totally fine. You know, I've taught people who their goal is to compete. That's what they want to do. I hate competing, you know, but I can still teach things that are applicable to it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not teaching, you know, quote unquote practical karate, you can still teach things that are applicable to self-defense, but you should be honest about how effective that's going to be. If you're doing, a self-defense technique at the end of one class every other week, and, it's against that straight lunge punch where the guy freezes at the end, and you never do any, resistant training.
I love when people punch me like that.
Yeah, it's great.
They do. And they always attack me from 4 directions and just.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's outstanding.
Oh, the 8 directions is even better.
The 8. Oh.
I've been trained for this.
So, yeah, I don't see it as being an issue, either way, as long as you're honest about it. And that is really the key, is everybody who runs a school wants to be able to market it as broadly as possible, to get the most students they can to keep the doors open so they can keep teaching, which I understand. But
that's the tough part, is the business versus the I don't know what you would call it, the integrity of your instructions of the martial arts, because it is a business at the end of the day for a lot of people.
Yeah. So, and it can be done, but it is something that you've really got to walk a line on, because you do have the business considerations of being able to pay rent and keep the lights on and make a
absolutely. You can't teach the next guy if you're out of business.
Right. And I don't think that it's bad for an instructor to get paid for their time, and not just their time, but the time they've put in up to this point to be able to teach you what they're teaching you. I think that's perfectly valid. So I don't necessarily believe in the, all martial arts instructors should not make a living off of martial arts. But if you're going to make a living off of martial arts, you need to be able to do it honestly. And if you can't do it honestly, you shouldn't be making a living off of it. It's kind of the way that I look.
Yep. And that well, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day about rank and whatnot, because really the only people that can truly monitor that is the person themselves, right? I mean, they need to be honest with their training. They need to be honest with their their background. They need to be honest with themselves. And we're talking about we had that episode many years ago of 20-year Shodans or multi-style masters, right? Some guy trained in like 16 different styles and creates his own system and becomes a soke or whatever. But outside the martial arts, no one has context to that.
Right.
And so and generally when people are doing that, they're opening up a sort of professional thing. They're doing it to make money. So that's their goal. But it's up to their soul whether they're going to be honest. Now, whether or not what they're teaching is legit or not, it doesn't matter. It's just like, are you being a salesperson or are you being a martial arts instructor? Mm-hmm. That's always been like the sort of thing, is like you can't make people do that. Well, what I wanted to ask was then, so had you put any thought, or do you see any trends of like what's the next thing? Because everything's the next thing, right? It was karate. And then, it was kickboxing, and then, like ninjutsu had its time, and then MMA came up, and UFC, and then Krav Maga and reality based. And so now it's practical karate for lack of a better term. So, what do you think is probably maybe the next thing on the block, or do you see practical karate kind of blowing up? I think it's going to roll back over. Like, people are going to stand up their curriculum, people are going to have their drills, and it's again going to kind of, ripple out and water down, whatever you want to call it, out. And then there's going to be a revolution again. So what's the next revolution?
Yeah, I think MMA is still, the sort of top dog as far as current popular martial arts overall. But if you kind of look closer within the MMA community and fan base, what you're finding now as it's been developing is that people are starting to specialize again. So, at the very beginning, everybody was specialized in things, and they threw them all in a ring and tried to figure out what was the best, which is an asinine thing to try and do in the first place. Because everything is, built for a different context. So then they kind of unified that over time, and it became, MMA as a style, so to speak. And you got this kind of typical, everybody does boxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, and wrestling. Those are the 4 pillars of MMA as a system. And that became it went through stages, because at first it was, oh, hey, the Muay Thai guys are kicking everybody's butt. Let's do that. Oh, no, the boxers are kicking everybody's butt. Let's do that. The wrestlers are kicking everybody's butt. Let's do that. So it kind of added up over time. And then you got to this more generalized MMA, which is what it's been for a while now. And you can go to an MMA gym and learn MMA. You don't have to learn all those individual pieces. But we're finding now people complaining, oh, well, they don't really know how to box properly, or their Muay Thai clinch is not good enough, or their, jiu-jitsu game is not on point. And people are starting to kind of refocus and re-specialize a little bit. And I tend to find that as people develop as martial artists, they kind of do that too, because they start out very specific. These are the little pieces that you need. Then they generalize from there and get into just all sorts of stuff. And then eventually they reach a point where they narrow down to the things that they like the best and that they feel most comfortable with. And so they specialize again, which I think is how a lot of martial arts actually ended up being developed and getting specialized. And, if you look at the origins of wrestling and boxing, they were originally part of pankration and in, Greece, where it was striking and grappling. Mm-hmm. And eventually people decided that they needed to be better at specifically one piece of that and kind of split it apart. And so I think it's probably going to be this kind of intersecting wave type of thing.
Yeah, that's cycle. I've had a couple of students that, one of them, he doesn't train with me anymore because he, various sundry things, but we were actually just talking online the other day about, he's like, I need more, I want more ground stuff, and I'm like, well, then go study with a jiu-jitsu guy, man. I mean, I can tell you some stuff, but it's within the context of what I do. But but he was going like, well, I need, because if I get attacked by a jiu-jitsu guy, and I'm like, when are you going to get attacked by a jiu-jitsu guy? I've known a lot of jiu-jitsu.
And if you do get attacked by a jiu-jitsu guy, tap out and then ask him who his instructor was, and then tell his instructor he's beating people up for no reason.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I said like the ultimate counter to being attacked by a grappler is just, and they'll let go and you just run off.
But the funniest thing to me is people's insistence on training for if they get attacked by another martial artist.
Right.
What are you doing that another martial artist is going to get so upset with you? Because another martial artist, as soon as you find out you do martial arts, regardless of whether they're the same or not, should result in a conversation.
It'll be a geek session.
It's interesting because Paul and I have talked about this before too, is, this idea of who are you training to fight? Are you training to fight the untrained, or are you training to fight the trained? And especially one of my bugaboos about Wing Chun, for example, is that you essentially train to fight Wing Chun practitioners.
Right. You only practice against this.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think that to some degree, I remember when I was very, very young, and I first started helping, I was taking a Hapkido class, and I first started helping the instructor with new students, and a new student came to spar with me, and we got to the center of the mat, and she came at me with the flailing arms technique. And honestly, I had no idea what to do. So, I mean, what do you think about that as far as training?
It doesn't work if you don't attack somebody right.
Right. Training to fight the trained, or training to fight the untrained?
That's one of those things where, again, I get the appeal. Mm-hmm. The general explanation for that is, well, if you can fight a trained person, you can fight an untrained person, which
you'd think
that to a point is somewhat true.
Yep.
It is more difficult to fight a trained person, when you're following specific rules to try and win a thing. Mm-hmm. And if you can land a punch on somebody who knows how to properly evade a punch, then you can land a punch on somebody who doesn't. That there are certain things.
That's excellent point. Yeah.
There's things that cross over, but at the same time, if you rely on feints to be able to punch that person,
yes.
An untrained person does not have trained responses to feints. Right. Mm-hmm. If you train only against trained, roundhouse kicks and jab cross and things like that. And then somebody comes at you with the, crazy windmilling arms.
Mm-hmm.
it looks different and it feels different.
Yeah.
And then of course, that's not even counting the fact that, a competitive arena and the adrenaline response to that,
Totally different energy.
different than the adrenal response to a self-defense situation.
Yeah.
Right.
Because whether you admit it or not, your subconscious understands this is not the same. The stakes are way higher.
Yeah.
Just because this person's untrained doesn't mean they couldn't kill you.
Right.
So whereas you've got somebody to make sure you're safe in another context. And so there is definitely crossover. And if you can fight a trained person, you definitely stand a better chance of fighting
Absolutely.
them than if you didn't have any training at all.
Mm-hmm.
But the context is still different. And if you want to be able to reliably defend yourself, that should probably be your focus. Occasionally trying to beat other trained people is definitely beneficial, definitely healthy, has good, advantages to that. But you've got to decide what your focus is, and you've got to be honest with yourself about what you're getting out of that. So, if you want to be good at beating other trained people, then you focus on beating those trained people in the context that that's for. If you want to be able to defend yourself, there's going to be some carryover from that, but you should probably focus your training more on the realistic situations and attacks and not even just that, but the verbal component of all of this.
Yeah.
So people get so mad about the way they are spoken to that doesn't generally happen when you're, in a sanctioned martial arts competition. You're not getting, shoved and yelled at, sworn at, and insulted. And even that, right off the bat, will throw half of people's skills out the window. So.
Do you train on that as well? I mean, as far as, I've been in schools and things like that where they get somebody pat it all up and then they'll scream and yell at you and like just really make it a psychologically difficult confrontation to prep people for that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I have done that, but it has been a while. That's the kind of thing that my instructor would do, but didn't get carried over quite so much. It's a hard thing to referee. So,
it is.
And if you're not comfortable with, intervening in something like that as you're running it and making sure everybody's safe, then it's not something you should do. But he would even, okay, we're going to work gun disarms. Just bear in mind, this is a last ditch effort. If they want stuff, give them stuff, that keeping that context in mind. But okay, if you absolutely had to, okay, we'll work this gun disarm. But he would then walk around the class while you're doing this, and he would take pads and smack them together to make a really loud banging sound. And you'd be surprised how many people just freeze as soon as that gunshot-like sound happens.
Yeah.
Things like that, and trying to train in ways where that is evident. Even things like when you're training with knives for anything, having the understanding that you're going to get cut is one thing. Using metal training knives, they're blunt, but
still hurts.
Oh, they still hurt. It gives you a lot more awareness. I'd love to train with one of those shock knives sometime.
Oh yeah.
But it's something that if you want to be prepared for a situation, you need to try and emulate that situation as closely as you can without, being incredibly dangerous to do.
Right.
If you're putting yourself in more danger practicing the thing than you're likely to face on a.
Yeah, it's funny because that just totally makes me think. It's the psychology of two people practice fighting with two rubber knives is just 180 degrees if you had live blades. I can't even imagine how scary it would be to stand in front of somebody else that has a live blade that is genuinely trying to cut a 3-inch gash or a 3-foot gash in you.
That's when I practice my running.
Right. Where and One of the things you said about like the gun techniques in the last ditch effort, the scenario that I think of is stuck in an elevator with your family.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of like, okay, we're at worst case scenario here where you cannot run,
no choice.
and you have people that you have to protect with you, so it's not just a matter of giving up.
Yeah.
And it is maximum dangerous at that point. But yeah, the idea of live blades is a very scary thing, especially if I would suggest that anyone interested, if you have a live blade at home, get a roast from the market and hang it up and just take a swipe at it, and you'll see genuinely how much you would open somebody up if you made the swing on them, or vice versa.
And there's the flip side of that. The example you brought up. Yeah, I think probably everybody who is, I guess, married or has kids or whatever, there should be like a flip side component to your training of like, it's not just you anymore.
Right.
So, I mean, you're carrying stuff, you're carrying kids, you got, you're getting in and out of the car. There's all kinds of a whirlwind of stuff going on. Plus you have to protect people. A few years ago, I had a friend of mine, his son and my son were friends, and they play together, and he did martial arts because, again, like we were talking about, oh, you do martial arts, and we started doing that. And then so we didn't care what the kids are doing anyway, but he came to my class and we trained for a while, and he trained in some guy who did Swai Chow, which is like Chinese wrestling. But I guess he was like, the guy he trained with was like, everyone's
super
trying to kill
intense.
you all the time. And anyway, so we were doing something about, I think we were doing knife defense or something. And or he asked about it, and we were talking about it, and we said whatever. He says, "Oh, I'd jump in and stab him and cut him and rip his spleen out and throw it out, did it." And I'm like, "Who's watching your son, man?" And he just looked at me like,
"Math does not compute."
Oh, because I think he said there was like a guy in the parking lot yelling at road rage kind of, and I was just like, "Well, who's watching Henry? Who's taking care of your kid? I mean, you."
Whoops.
What if they've got a buddy? That there's that whole like ladder of I do the 5 levels of self-defense, kind of thing. It's like, where's your escape? Where's and his training from his instructor, and again, he didn't feed himself like we were talking about earlier. Didn't incorporate that. It was all like, we're the baddest thing ever, and we're going to destroy you, and
aggressive.
Stomp the groin, So
which has it has its time and place, but yeah,
it's fun at times to train like that.
We would include in our training, protecting somebody else from things. We do scenario drills where you have to protect somebody, you have to get somebody out of a place, and anytime we were doing any sort of a self-defense scenario exercise, usually at least once per session, my instructor would get asked a question about something, and his response would be, "Why didn't you run?"
Yeah.
Because it would end up being, "Oh, they're too far away for me to do this." Like, perfect, run. And that was actually what he intended for you to be training was, oh, as soon as there's enough of a gap, they can't reach you anyway, and you can get a run.
Go.
Yeah. I was watching a Krav Maga school was next to the dance place where I was subletting, and they were doing knife defenses, and we had time between the class, and so I was watching, and they were doing a thing, and they did a knife takeaway, and the guy did a takeaway, and he jumped back like 3 feet, and then turned back around and re-engaged. I'm like, "You're out. You're done. You've got the weapon, and you've got clearance. Why are you?" Like, okay, that's the way to. It's interesting that you bring that up, because that's one of my bugaboos. Speaking of that, Dan, is when everyone talks about like, oh, our karate is the ancient art of the bodyguards, of the but then they immediately pivot and talk about combat. And I was in the military, granted it was the Navy and it was a submarine, so we didn't have a whole lot of combat. But we or that we know of. But it's like, have you ever done any bodyguard work or personal protection work? You're not there to fight.
No.
You're there to get your principal away.
Absolutely.
And so, but that doesn't sell. Like, we'll teach you to run away with your,
I just watched Fallen Angel, and great movie, but I'm guessing there is a lot more physical combat in that than any Secret Service person would
Yeah.
ever want to engage in,
Yeah,
you know?
you train for it. Granted,
Right.
we had the Shane Franklin, who at the time ran the Marine martial art program, and one of the
Hmm.
things that he talked about was we train, we do throws, we do takedowns, we do submissions, blah blah blah. He said, but everything I do is so I can get back to my gun
Yeah.
because that's my
And,
job. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
contact.
And my understanding is also that that training forms a bond between the people that are training together, and it forms a mindset of discipline and, you know, again, all of these other benefits that martial arts brings that has nothing to do with kick punch block. So I don't know. I think that to me, um, when you think of the benefits of martial arts not having put you in those situations in the first place, that's the real self-defense, is
Yeah.
simply not being there in the first place.
I think that's probably a good place to wrap this up. It's been an hour, and I don't want to take any more of Noah's time. Noah, it's great to virtually meet you. It's
You too.
you've been doing really great work for a lot of years, and we look forward to more.
Maybe someday we'll all be able to exchange fluids again.
Yes, exactly. I know. I just
Let's not put it that way, though.
Oh no, no,
as
that's
it
a bad
were.
term.
Yeah, this is a family show. Um, it's great. And so anyone who's in Flint, Michigan, I'll probably have some in the show notes for maybe a link. Is there a link to the
What
page?
was the name of the school again?
It's going to be hosted by Heian Karate Do, like the Heian Kata. It's a
It's
Shotokan
pronounced
school.
Pinan.
Right, it's pronounced Pinan. And run by Paul Musolf. And we don't have a page up for it yet because the
Okay.
COVID stuff kind of put things on a bit of a hold. But I'll be at some point posting it up on my Karate Obsession page. I'm sure he'll be posting it on the Heian Karate Do Facebook page as well.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
where can people find you? You got links to Shill?
I've got karateobsession.com is kind of the big one.
All right.
Facebook.com/Karate Obsession. Instagram is at Karate Obsession. YouTube.
Don't forget about the YouTube channel. I just subscribed today.
Yeah, YouTube is Karate Obsession as well. Once I can have more partners, I would like to put more videos of partner work up, but to be perfectly honest, the only people that I have in my household that I can use are so much smaller than me. It just looks bad.
Ah.
Well, you need to
I'm a
make sure.
giant of a person, so I need
Well, you
bigger.
need to make sure that they're doing the technique, so everyone go like, "Oh wow, see how easy this
Wow.
works."
Yeah, there's that. There's that. I got to steal them for a little longer then, though, because I gotta have them practice.
That's true. That's true. But anyway, Noah Legel, again, thanks for all your work. Thanks for your earnest training, and thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Noah. Well, that was fun.
Oh man, outstanding.
He's fun to talk to. Boy,
Yeah,
there's nothing like a little dojo talk, just
Yeah.
sitting around BSing about martial arts.
Well, I mean, he's kind of I don't know how he is in class, but I mean, he's kind of a low key, thoughtful guy. So it's
Yeah,
enjoying
yeah.
to talk to him, and a self professed geek like the rest of us.
Right.
So that's
I much prefer. I don't know. I prefer sort of the philosopher martial artists. I think that he talked a little bit about the concepts kind of aspect to martial arts, and those are the things that you can communicate to other people and that you can carry forward through generations. The actual techniques themselves, when he was talking about the things that his instructor did in class, and smacking the pads together and things like that.
Mhm.
Those are things that generally get lost through the generations. Those things don't come along for the ride with the rest of the system, I guess, if you will. So the guys that are more thoughtful and go back to first principles and things like that, I think those are the guys that are carrying martial arts forward for generations, and not just to their particular students. So
right. Well, that's what I liked what he's talking about like the intersecting wave of how things are going to change. Because I think there was like a big, huge revolution, maybe from like the 80s and 90s, to maybe, like the late 90s or maybe just the 2000s, a change, the practical karate thing blew up, and,
Yeah.
or just, the mixed martial arts, as we were talking about, and all that stuff. It's kind of good to, take a wider view of, going back and seeing where it kind of started,
Hmm.
and how it's all still the same, and, getting again, what he mentioned many times in the show is what I've mentioned in other shows, and I tell my students all the time is context. Everything is
Yeah.
context. You got to look
Yeah.
at the context of what your training is. You got to look at the context of what that system or style came up in.
Hmm.
All that ties in, and it's going to keep intersecting and separating and intersecting and
Yeah.
separating.
Well, and I thought it was interesting too that one of the things that we talked about was this idea of and he brought it up, that the things that you can do on your own. You had mentioned feeding yourself kind of stuff, and he had mentioned learning the culture and reading books, and there are all of these aspects where if you're trying to motivate yourself to do something, or whatever the case might be, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And there's a lot of different aspects to the martial arts that you can study. If you're interested in history, you can study the history of martial arts. If you're interested in, if you're a maker or a builder, you can build your own wooden dummy, or whatever the case might be. There's lots to explore there that people can do if they choose to. So it was a fun call. It was a
Yeah,
fun
it was
talk.
really good.
Yeah.
Again, I love talking to someone. I mean, I love talking to you. Don't get me wrong,
Well.
but I love, not just talking to us. I like
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah. Me too.
And I try not to get, just like-minded people on here. I just get people that again, like you say, are thoughtful, and it's good to hear, like the same sort of repeating things that we
The
talk about.
themes.
And
Yeah.
yeah, they're like, oh,
Yeah.
context. I talk about context all the time. Here's this
All the
guy
time.
who I've never
Yep.
talked to.
Right.
You know,
And he brings it up first.
and he brings it up first.
Yep.
So it's great, but it's good that, he's being identified as a resource for martial artists in general.
Yep.
And he doesn't, like his videos are a reasonable length, unlike this episode. And it's good. It's a little thought to put it in
It's a
there.
little thought. Yeah, that's the
He
thing.
he
You
puts it
plant the
out.
seed
He
and
puts
sort
it
of walk
out.
away.
Yeah, like you wouldn't
Yep.
just watch the Waza Wednesdays, and
Hmm.
he and his sensei would do. And it's all contextual. It's like
Yeah.
it's not supposed to be encapsulated. It's just
That's
supposed to
right.
be, here's a thought, go with it.
Yeah.
And
Experiment, play.
yeah, it's much better to, like my close personal friend Ian Amber, he says, he's like, give it a go,
Yeah.
try that out, see how it works, maybe it'll
Yeah.
work, maybe it won't. Then we'll tear it apart. Being a thoughtful martial artist, I guess, is probably the thing
Yeah.
that I get from him more, and the thing that I appreciate both from his work and just
Yeah.
martial artists in general.
Well, one show note that I'd like to make
Sure.
is because one of your students complained, I went out and got a brand new $130 microphone. So to that student, I hope my voice sounds better on this podcast
Oh
than
my
it did on the
gosh,
last.
it's
Because it
like,
was awful.
it's
Awful
like,
on the last one. It was unlistenable.
it was horrible, and
Yeah.
this is like butter.
Smooth butter.
That's right. Just talk to him, Dan. Just talk to him. But
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's good. We'll test that mic out more. Dan, always good to talk to you,
always good to talk to you, Paul.
and good to hear you now.
Yeah.
And we will talk to you all again very soon.